Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up, and make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video, and yeah, let's begin. Okay, before we jump into this video, I do want to pitch a question to you guys. If myself and Mariah, my fiance, if we made like a vlogging channel, would you guys watch it? Like, would you guys want to watch it? I'm just kind of curious. We're just kind of spitballing ideas. I just wanted to pick your all's brains and see how receptive you would be to that. But let me know down in the comment section. Would you guys watch that vlogging channel where it's just me and Mariah goofing off, doing like going buying comic books or, you know, eating food at different places, right? Like testing food at different restaurants and so on. We don't really know what form it'll take, but let me know, right? I'm just kind of curious what you guys think. So we are picking up with the Juggernaut one-shot, and here's the thing, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, right? This is the Juggernaut's, you know, own personal series. Now, this is technically the third volume that the Juggernaut's had in terms of his own solo series, so don't really expect this to be like a super long-lived series, right? We're probably not going to see this reach anything like 50 or 60 issues. If I'm a betting man, I'd say at most it'll get to about 12 to 15, and then Marvel will call it a day. It could go longer, and I hope that it does, but for the most part, Juggernaut's never really been a character who's been able to hold his series for a long time, but hopefully we can change that, Rob Core. Hopefully you guys buy enough of these comics that we kind of keep it going for a good long time. But this story is written by Fabian Nicieza, and this guy is OG double OG. Fabian Nicieza, and here's the thing. I know Rob Liefeld fans are going to be pissed with me. Don't care. I feel like Fabian Nicieza was the brains behind the operation. This guy was the one who just basically made it all work in the 1990s. I don't care what anybody says. They can come to me and they can pitch me some story about how Rob Liefeld was the one who made Deadpool and all that kind of stuff. Maybe he did. But the only reason why Deadpool's comics and really even Deadpool as a character, and the only reason why the X-Force comics were awesome in the 1990s was because of Fabian Nicieza, right? So the idea here is this picks up, but not really, it picks up during like what's going on with the X-Men right now, but there is a bit of an explanation that we need to offer, but we'll offer that here in a minute, right? What this does is it basically picks up basically in Manhattan, right? And you end up having Kane Marco, who's really just working for damage control. And that's kind of the crazy thing here, right? That's kind of the nuts situation about this is, remember, damage control, those are the ones that basically deal in the aftermath of like buildings being superhero battles, different things like that. And so in the aftermath of like the War of Realms, different things like that, when you basically had like the Battle of New York and so on and so forth, which is actually one of the things you're looking for, right? Residual traces from the 9 realms, basically indicating that like there's some magic here that can either be used by the government or there's nothing to really concern themselves with. Whenever you have massive calamities that take place and it leads to the destruction of property in the United States and sometimes even across the world, damage control are the ones who respond to it. Now, how they respond to it varies from story to story. The result of this is that Kane Marco isn't necessarily a bad guy here, and that's what's so awesome about this. That's why I'm so glad Fabian Nicieza is writing this at this point in time, because as opposed to getting Kane Marco where he's just, you know, just lumbering along and destroying things because Blarg, Kane Marco, Charles Xavier's bad, instead of getting something like that, we actually get like some pretty cool nuance to this character, that what he's doing right now is he's basically just demolishing buildings for damage control, and he's the best person suited for it. But the other issue that they're running into is they're basically running into squatters, right? Which is to say homeless individuals, specifically homeless teenagers, who were just taking up residence inside of these various properties, right? These various homes, derelict buildings, different things like that. Now, the funny thing about this is that there is an actual legal doctrine called squatters' rights, and you guys have probably heard of that before, but basically what it means is, say for example that like I owned a house somewhere, and say for example that I left that house vacant for like a year, and like a vagrant, a homeless person, were to just show up there and manage to find their way into the house and then take up residence in it. I can't just like go in there and grab all their stuff and throw it on the curb. Like, they actually have squatters' rights, meaning I have to treat them like a tenant that hasn't paid rent and go through the entire eviction process. Now, different states have different laws. Some states I don't think recognize squatters' rights, so like if a squatter just walks into a property and takes up residence, you can just go in there guns blazing and chase them out. It depends, I think, on what state you're talking about. I don't really know the state-to-state laws, so I'm not going to quote any in specific, but it's one of the things that they're having to deal with here, like basically young kids. Now, the issue is, on the surface, Juggernaut's like, okay, I'll go take care of them, and then suddenly the Juggernaut is stopped dead in his tracks. So not really stopped dead in his tracks, but enough to where he can't really seem to be able to move in a forward direction. Now, this is a big deal, and this is one of these instances where Fabian Nicieza does something that's absolutely genius, because we've only ever really seen a couple of instances that I know of off the top of my head where a person's been able to stop the Juggernaut, right? It's the core nature of his powers. Once the Juggernaut starts moving, virtually nothing can stop him. Now, we are treating this with a little bit of common sense, right? So like things like cosmic entities can obviously stop the Juggernaut. A person who can warp reality can stop the Juggernaut. A person who can levitate him using, you know, telekinesis can stop the Juggernaut. Like a little bit of common sense there. Those kind of things can do that. But in terms of like sheer force, there really isn't anything out there. The only real instance that I'm aware of that happening, I think, was maybe with Onslaught. Although I don't remember off the top of my head, he was able to punch Juggernaut across the country. So, you know, that kind of speaks for itself. And then the Incredible Hulk, when he was powered by the celestial technology from Apocalypse, as well as the Heroes Reborn universe, right? So like that's when he was able to basically stop the Juggernaut dead in his tracks. But the Juggernaut's basically caught unawares here, right? The Squatters are just like, stay away from here or you're going to get worse. But the Juggernaut's totally caught by surprise, because one of the questions of the guys from Damage Control is, did one of the teenagers have like kinetic force powers? Like, were they able to basically manipulate kinetic energy? And that's one of the questions that Juggernaut has, is like, whoever this kid is, the Juggernaut wants to know who they are, right? He wants to get his hands on them. But the cool thing about this is we end up basically jumping back to a few months ago. Now, this is where the explanation kind of comes into play a little bit in terms of where the Juggernaut has been. And the reason why is we haven't really seen Kane Marco since the end of Matt Rosenberg's run on X-Men going into the House of X stories by Jonathan Hickman. And what we ended up getting there was a story arc called We Are Alive, or We Are Many, or something along those lines. I don't remember. Or no, we've always been here, I think is what it was called. But basically it was the final story arc, and it ended up seeing a couple things happen with Kane Marco. The first was that a general by the name of, at least a guy by the name of General Callahan, ended up basically suppressing the mutant gene of Ileana Rasputin, which released her darker half, also known as Darkchild, which is basically all the powers of Ileana Rasputin with none of like her morality, basically. But what ended up happening is Darkchild basically ripped the crystal out of Kane Marco, stripped him of his powers, and then threw him in limbo, right? Threw him into the limbo dimension. And he had just kind of resided there, right? He just sort of showed up there. And he's just a small, frail guy, right? I mean, the reason why he's so colossal in size is because of all the powers that the gym offers him, which is all of his powers as well as an intimidating size. And so one of the things that he ends up doing is basically kind of stringing his armor together as best he can, which is astronomically heavy, and then just dragging it along the ground, right? Until he gets to a point whereby he can basically escape limbo. And so from there, we end up, picking up kind of in the modern day, in this moment right now, with Juggernaut basically walking through this place where all these squatters are taking up residence. And again, it's not so much what Juggernaut does here that's so interesting, it's what he doesn't do. Under normal circumstances, if this was like 20 years ago, Kane Marco would have just rampaged through these buildings, and who cares if the kids died or not, right? His job is to demolish the buildings, and the buildings have been demolished. If they didn't want to die, they wouldn't stay there. That'd be Kane Marco's line of logic. He's not wrong, but it's still kind of a dick thing to do, right? But at this point, he's taking a more gentler hand. And the reason why really seems to be Fabian Nicieza pushing towards the idea that with Kane Marco being locked in limbo the way he was and being without his powers, he basically had to come to terms with who he was and what he was about. What's the role of Juggernaut in the bigger picture? Is he really just this great big lumbering beast who's not too smart, just kind of rampaging throughout the world, tearing stuff up and getting beat by the X-Men every once in a while? Or is there something more to his character that he hasn't quite figured out yet? And so he basically shows up here and says, look guys, I'm not here to tear the building down, but I have demolished enough buildings to know this thing's barely hanging on, but I'm here to help you guys out. Like I'm here, because one of you guys is basically a mutant, right? Now at that point, Juggernaut is basically seized by these powers. Like he's essentially seized by these powers and just kind of sent crashing down. And that's when he starts to realize that this person is not really using a force field, right? They're not using telekinesis or anything like that, that it really is the manipulation of kinetic energy. More so than that, this person is able to control kinetic energy. They can slow things down, they can speed things up, and it's basically this girl who calls herself D-Cell who says she's not a mutant. Now, I know I titled this video a new Omega level mutant, but I'm reserving judgment on this. And the reason why is because for anybody who's been reading Fabian Nicieza for any real measure of time, he is a guy who isn't necessarily full of tricks, but he is a guy who does like to pull a red herring, right? He is a guy who likes to kind of send you looking in one direction only to kind of pull the rug out from under you, right? So while this girl D-Cell kind of claims she's not a mutant, I'm reserving judgment, and I'm going to assume that she is, right? I kind of feel like she is, but using her powers, what she's able to do is basically slow down the momentum of Juggernaut. And it's a genius idea. The issue with this is that because of the power that Juggernaut possesses, because of how durable, how strong he is, and the fact that he's basically backed by what is more or less a godly cosmic being, and the fact that like the toll is so extreme, it basically ends up kind of knocking out D-Cell. Now, of course, when that happens, Juggernaut falls, there's this great big huge kind of collapse, that goes on, and he's like, guys, drop your phones for a second and like help me get this girl out, right? Help me clear out this rubble. And from there, she's taken to Bellevue Trauma Center. And Kane Marco actually stays with her. And this is kind of the nurturing hand of Kane Marco. It's very uncharacteristic. And under normal circumstances, we as comic book fans don't necessarily like it when the characters that we read about are written out of character, which is really kind of a weird explanation to have, because at the end of the day, it's just whatever version of the character that we like more. The idea here is that he basically kind of talks to her and says, hey, look, like, you know, you're obviously a mutant that has like these interesting powers. I can help you get to Krakoa, right? I can help you get to where the mutants live. Now, here's a couple things, one big thing that I kind of want to address here, right? One big thing that I want to talk about here. One of the big reasons why Kane Marco is a guy who's kind of turning over a new leaf is not just because of what's happening in this story. That's kind of, that really kind of seems to be the end result of what he's been through. But what ended up happening during the events of Matt Rosenberg's X-Men run is he had actually approached Cyclops. Juggernaut has for some time been working to kind of turn over a new leaf. But one of the things she says, you know, one of the things that D-Cell says is like, I'm not a mutant. And Kane Marco kind of makes this funny comment. He's like, you know, with the name D-Cell, it does make you sound like a battery, right? And she's like, well, you know, Juggernaut makes you sound like I don't know. She can't think of anything. She's like, I don't know. It's a cool name. And it is. It's a very cool name. Here's my question. If you could give yourself a superhero name, what would it be, right? Like if you could name yourself something, because I know you guys have. Don't tell me that you haven't. I'm not going to tell you mine. Mine's kind of embarrassing, but you guys have to tell me yours. This is a one-way street of friendship, Robcore. So, with that being the case, we end up having this scenario where we kind of jump back to Limbo, and we actually end up picking up in a place called the Crossroads. Now, Fabian Nicieza kind of plays this fast and loose, and I'm not overly familiar with Limbo, but I am familiar enough to know that this basically looks like the Nexus, right? It's essentially what this looks like. And the reason why is because, of course, you have a tree, and you have all these hands pointing in different directions, and the question of Juggernaut is like, where do I go to get out of here? But the reality is that in order to escape Limbo, you basically have to sacrifice a portion of yourself, which is to say you have to sacrifice something from before in order to move forward, right? It's just kind of one of the many laws of Limbo that exist out there. And when he kind of tells this story to D-Cell, her question is, if you left your armor there, how do you still have it? And he's like, it's a different armor, it's a longer story, right? So it looks like we're actually going to get that explanation in terms of Kane Marco's new suit and what his new suit's capable of, if it's capable of anything different from his old suit. The other part of this is that D-Cell's friends had actually recorded the altercation between herself and Juggernaut on what's called her RoxTube channel. So basically Rox on Oil has like a social media platform, which is obviously YouTube, because YouTube seems to have its hands some pretty seedy things. At the very least, you know, they've got their own fair share of problems that they deal with. And the idea is that the videos, of course, gotten like 1 million views, right? Which is a lot of views. That's bunches of views, right? That's a lot of views. I remember there was a time on YouTube, once upon a time, when people believed that you would get like, that as a creator, you'd make like $1 per view. And it's like, if you got 1 million views, you got like $1 million. And it's like, man, I wish. That would be nuts. I'd be like PewDiePie. I'd make videos for a year and quit. Like it'd be, it would be insane. But the idea here is that Kane Marco's like, okay, look, when he asks her about her powers, she explains it in this really interesting way. And this really goes into why it is that I'm calling her what is more or less a new Omega level mutant. That what she's able to do is control the speed of objects. And so there's an instance where she talks about how this YouTube channel that she has with her friends, that they basically pull pranks. And that one of the things that they did, for example, was they basically made an elevator take an hour to get to the floor. Or during the Women's World Cup parade, that she made the confetti take 5 hours to fall just by manipulating its speed. Now, on the surface, this is throwaway, but if you extrapolate this out and you apply the principle of an Omega level mutant to this, and you say that it's a person with no upper limit, this is a girl that could slow down the Earth's rotation. This is a girl that could slow down the movement of everybody throughout the world. She's a person that could slow down how fast plant life grows across the world. This is a girl that could slow down, could speed it up, right? She could age you up super fast, right? She could, if she can control the speed of objects, then with enough control, she can control the speed of matter. And if she can control the speed of matter, then she becomes a person who can basically speed up and slow down matter at any rate she chooses. And as we know, like, heat is the result of friction, which is matter moving at a rapid pace against something else. And being able to do that is basically the ability to create explosions. There's no real limit to the kind of things this girl could do, but she's certainly a planetary threat. I mean, imagine if like tomorrow you went to bed, it was Monday, and then you woke up and it was Friday, right? Just like time passed that fast, right? The ability to just kind of speed things up, assuming that she could alter matter, which is space and time on that level, even on a smaller level. The sun sets and rises in the span of like 3 hours, like just that kind of stuff. It's cool. It's amazing. Not to mention like the impact it would have on Earth's life, right? On like the entire existence of humanity and all sentient beings or non-sentient beings on Earth, if just like the speed of everything was sped up or slowed down. So again, there's a case to make here that this girl is an Omega level level character, right? Like she has Omega level powers. It just depends on what level Fabian Nicieza wants to push them to. But the other thing about this is, of course, she doesn't reveal her real name, right? So there's basically building a little bit of mystery, and the fact that her and Kane Marco will probably have some adventures together, different things like that. But it's the other thing where she basically says, hey, like you should check this out, right? Like the idea is that if Kane Marco is working for damage control and the idea is to control damage, then she in turn basically presents him with what one of her subscribers told her, which is basically just the Immortal Hulk going on a rampage. And so it's kind of like, you have to stop this, right? Like, I mean, if your whole job is to curtail damage and you want to be a good guy, then it's time for you to start being a good guy and step up to the Immortal Hulk. And so what we're going to end up getting is basically the new Juggernaut against the Immortal Hulk. And I am excited for that. I am so excited for that. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.